Good day, everyone. We are going to discuss the form, meaning, and use of grammar. The reporters are Veloso Emery, Gamboa Noel Jr., Santos Crystalline, Momo Christine Gain, Diganyon Joveline, Vidaya Luke Jericho, yours truly, Crystal Ann Parcon, and Panal Ira. Now let us hear from Veloso Emery for the introduction.
Hi, I am Emery Boloso and I am going to tackle the introduction of grammar, form, meaning, and use. So first is, the concept of grammar and how to teach it includes a wide range of perspectives. So education arose from a protracted process of determining various techniques to teaching, and it's sometimes difficult to tackle this task at hand. So next is, some teaching approaches focus on formal rules of grammar that precede language practice or performance. So some approaches develop rules and formal grammar practices that are primarily based on language activity, performance, or application. So next is, deductive approach to the teaching of grammar provides a general rules and then gives students opportunities to practice the language using specific examples. Other approaches provide students with examples of language and ask them to state the grammar rules that apply. Deductive approach means that you are giving learners rules, then examples, then practice. So deductive approach of grammar provides general rules after which the students are given opportunities to practice. There are also other approaches that offer students detailed examples of language and ask them to state the appropriate grammar rules. So next is, inductive approach expects students to discover the grammar rule by reference to the example. So inductive approach means that it involves the learners detecting or noticing patterns and working out a rule for themselves before they practice the language. So this approach is to expect students to discover to instruction, and learning grammar is to learn how to apply the rules to a wide variety of sentences. So next is, a good deal of research has been undertaken in the differences and effectiveness of inductive and deductive approaches to teaching grammar that shows the effectiveness of both approaches to in different contexts and with different types of grammar rules. So there are still advantages in and disadvantages in every approach, even though that many researchers shows that they are effective. There are still a lot of things to consider in order to adapt a single approach, like the many reasons and goals for learning English, the situations in which it is learned, students' age, class size, relative difficulty of the grammar element in question, and student skill level. That is why it is important to learn the approaches in grammar teaching to ensure that every components of grammar that the other approach may lack on will be also fulfilled.
Thank you, Miss Veloso. So now let us hear from Gamboa Noel Jr. for the purpose.
So for the first bullet, the first perspective adopted in this book is that grammar teaching in second language context seeks to help learners gain grammar ability so that they can use grammar accurately, meaningfully, and appropriately. Uh, these three adjectives that define grammar ability: accurate, meaningful, and appropriate, may be quite different from each other teacher's use of grammar. This bullet, it stated here the purpose of teaching grammar and how it can help the learners to use grammar accurately, meaningfully, and appropriately. The three adjectives that define grammar ability can be also defined as the form, the meaning, and the use of grammar. And it is true that teaching grammar may vary from teacher to teacher because every teacher has their own perspective or on their own views of grammar. So for the next one, reflection, however, reveals that grammar knowledge does not just relate to accuracy. Um, yes, indeed. For example, in our country, when we are speaking in English in the classroom, our teachers are not focusing on our accuracy in speaking in English, but they are more focused on the meaning of what we are saying, and after that, they correct us accordingly. And so for the next bullet, relevant components of meaning, semantics, and use or pragmatics are important parts of grammar knowledge. Mm, um, on this part, it simply shows the meaning and the use of grammar. Because when we say semantics, it is the interpretation of words, um, or simply the meaning of words in a sentence. And while on the other hand, pragmatics is defined as how the context contributes to meaning. Uh, for the next one, knowing the distinction between these components of grammar knowledge can help grammar teachers be more effective. Um, yes, because having an expert knowledge about these three components can greatly affect the teacher's views in grammar, and they will not only focus on one component. They will not focus on one component, just like on form, uh, the meaning, and the use. But they will use uh, three of the three components in grammar knowledge.
Thank you, Mr. Gamboa. Now let us hear from Ms. Santos Crystalline for the form.
One of the useful way in order for us to think about grammar is using a form. Now, what is the meaning of form? To say form, it includes structure of words, phrases, and clauses. And its general structure can be described as the possible inflections of word and possible syntax, phrases, and clauses. It includes morphosyntactic and lexical patterns and also phonemic patterns. And it is also describes as to either the required form of a word. And one of the example is the sentence which is she likes to travel. It is correct rather than the sentence which is she liked to travel. And we can easily avoid grammatical incorrectness because of the form. So basically, when we say form, it is the rules that should be followed, and that's why it's really essential.
Thank you, Ms. Santos. Now let us hear from Ms. Momo Christengain for the grammar ability.
Grammar ability involves not just simplicity learning or describing rules, but also using language for real communicative purposes. First, we're talking about broad ability. This is something that you can do whenever you want, once you have learned it, such as reading, swimming, or speaking a language. Specific ability is the other type of ability. Refers to something you can or cannot accomplish in a specific situation. Rules provide helpful guidelines for understanding grammar and clearly have their place in a grammar classroom. But being able to state a grammar rule does not mean that one can actually use it. Grammar competencies is more than just memorizing or describing rules. It also entails using language for real-world communication. Rules give useful guides for learning grammar and have a definition position in the grammar classroom. But knowing how to state a grammar rules does not equal how to apply it. So the distinction between stating a grammar rule and using grammar suggests that one type of knowledge explicit does not necessarily translate in another type of knowledge. Implicit knowledge, this is the information that is simply to express, write down, and impart the operation of explicit information is referred to as explicit knowledge. Implicit knowledge includes skills that be transferred one employment to another.
Thank you, Ms. Momo. Let us hear from Miss Degignon Jovelin for the semantics or meaning.
In addition to form, grammar contains a semantic component. When we say semantic component, it is the study of the words and the meaning of the sentences. There are three categories in semantics. The first one is lexical semantics. It is the study of the word. It is basically the meaning of the word by word. And the second one is phrasal semantics. It is the study of the constructions of the meaning of the phrase and the sentences. So, the job of semantics it is to study the basic literal meaning of the words. If people paid no attention to the meaning, what will be the point of communication? And if grammar teachers only focus on form, they quickly run into problems, such as learners will be having difficulties in learning the grammar, since we already know that learning the grammar is difficult. So, if teachers are only focused on forms such as morphology and syntax, then learners might be discouraged learning to acquire the second language. So learners should also know the meaning of the word and its sentences as a whole. For example, I saw a movie. That means something very different from I am seeing a movie. Let's start with the first sentence. I saw a movie. When we say saw, it is the past tense of the see. It means it already happened. He or she already watched that movie. While the second sentence is I am seeing the movie. I am seeing a movie. When we say seeing, it is an act of looking for something. So it means the sentence represents that he or she is looking for a movie, that he or she might watch it later. So a learner may produce either a structure accurately. It means some learners will get the exact meaning of the two sentences. However, the two sentences have different intended meaning. So, when the learners don't know how to interpret its meaning, it might cause a problem. So, it is very necessary that learners need to know how to use the correct structure to reach an intended meaning. Learners should also know the use of semantics for them to get or quickly understand the meaning of a word or a sentence in learning the grammar. And that is semantics.
Thank you, Ms. Degignon. Now let us hear from Mr. Vidaya Luke Jericho for the use or function of grammar.
Good day. Today I will discuss about the use or function of grammar forms. Let's read the statement on the PowerPoint. Moreover, certain types of grammar forms are preferable over other things depending on the contexts. Example of sentences with contractions are much more common in spoken language or informal types of writing than in academic texts, meaning that the preferable use or function of a grammar forms depends on the context of a sentence, or whether if the conversation is formal or informal. Here we have an example. I'm happy to see that you are here. As you can see the example, contractions are utilized. And contractions are much more used in an informal conversation than in academic texts. On the second slide, it talks about how conversation versus writing and formal versus informal shows the different degrees on how the function or use of a word differs on the needed context. The difference is not just invented by any other people. It can be traced back on research on register variation by Biber 1988 and Biber and Conrad 2019. Now, I will discuss about the table 2.1. Here we have the grammar feature, form, meaning, and use. The first one that I will discuss is about the phrasal verbs. In form, it is a multi-word verb that consists of lexical verb and a particle. Particle is a type of word that is typically used to point a direction or a movement. It is such as up, down, back, in, and on. These phrasal verbs can be substituted with a single word. In the example that we have, it is give up. Give up can be substituted with the word surrender. It is more common used in fictions and informal contexts and much more rare in academic registers. The second one that we have is present progressive. It is a combination of verb be and a gerund. It expresses an ongoing or continuous action in present times. The most frequent use of present progressive are in conversation. It is most frequently used with a dynamic verbs than as stative and copular verbs.
Thank you, Mr. Vidaya. Now it is time for me to discuss about the explicit and implicit knowledge. So first, let us talk about the explicit knowledge. So describing grammar features as in Table 2.1 that was discussed by Mr. Vidaya earlier has a number of advantages over focusing solely on form, meaning, or use separately. So as we all know, some teachers may have explicit knowledge of certain pieces of a grammar feature, but may not have explicit knowledge of all three aspects. It is very important for us as future educators to be knowledgeable enough when it comes to the form, meaning, and use of grammar. For example, a teacher may be very comfortable explaining how to form the present progressive but may not be able to explain how to use it in authentic discourse. So teachers with explicit knowledge of all three aspects of a given grammar feature are better equipped to explain a given feature to students and, of course, to devise activities that raise students' awareness of grammar. So later, I will have a further discussion about this topic, so let us just proceed with the next slide. So let's talk about implicit knowledge. Viewing grammar from an FMU perspective shows that knowing grammar does not just mean knowing rules or exceptions to rules. It involves knowing how to use form to gain an intended meaning in a given context. So now let's take a look at the tables on the screen. So explicit knowledge refers to the most easily accessible and recorded knowledge. Tacit or implicit knowledge is a result of the personal and first-hand experiences we come across. In explicit knowledge, articulation is comparatively unchallenging, while in tacit knowledge, it is extremely difficult to communicate. Explicit knowledge is codified in our surroundings in various forms, documents, books, memos, while tacit knowledge can be acquired basically through experiences and contains personal institutions and insights, reports, and others. Explicit knowledge is easy to document, while the documentation is quite challenging in tacit knowledge. Explicit knowledge is structured while tacit knowledge is personal. So for us to better understand the differences between explicit and tacit knowledge, this is the summary. Explicit knowledge is tangible, visible, public, can be accessed by third persons. Once shared, it belongs to everyone. It means can be seen above the water. So that is the main reason why you can see on the screen that the 20% can be seen above the water. So the things hidden underwater, not literally, are your tacit knowledge. So it is tangible, invisible, private, can be accessed only on a first personal basis. I hope that you have learned something about explicit and implicit knowledge. Now let us hear from Ms. Panal Ira for further discussion about form, meaning, and use of grammar.
Hi, I am Ira Panal and I am going to summarize our discussion in relation to the importance of form, meaning in use in relation to teaching grammar to students. Teaching of FMU is a useful guide that will be helpful for teachers to determine the attention of their lessons in how they will describe and explain grammar to their learners. Providing such a description might encourage students to become active participants in their own grammar acquisition and comprehension, helping to raise students' awareness of not only the form, meaning of grammar, but also of how grammar is used in different contexts, allows them to be active consumers of various types of grammar knowledge, and may even help them notice how grammar is used in different situations, promoting active participation in their own grammar learning. The slide explains that form is focused on accuracy and meaning should be also considered in order to have an actual communication. And it should be appropriate in any context which pertains to its use or function. The components of grammar knowledge are needed in order to achieve accuracy, meaningfulness, and appropriacy. It is just as the same as what is experienced when learners are engaging in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. The slide explains that Larson and Freeman considers grammaring as a fifth skill that a learner should also possess along with the other skills, because when we do the other skills such as speaking and writing, then we are also doing grammar, whether we do it consciously and unconsciously. As for the last slide, as to summarize what we discussed, here is the three-dimensional grammar framework that shows the difference between form, meaning, and use, as how they are related to structure, semantics, and pragmatics. Form involves structure, either the rules and formation of words and sentences, as well as the sounds of those words and how it is represented in written symbols. While meaning is semantics, for it could be through lexical, in which it is a meaning of a word in dictionary. And also grammatical, in which the meaning is presented through the word order, and grammatical signals. While the use of pragmatics, because it involves the function of it in different contexts, such as in social context, linguistic discourse context, and presumptions about context in which a background belief or implicit assumption about the world connected to a speech whose reality is taken for granted in discourse.
Thank you so much, Miss Panal. So that would be all for our discussion. I hope that you have learned something from us. Thank you so much for listening and see you again next time.